Rich, I see you. I see you. I got you in here. Can you hear me? Drop something in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat or something if you hear me. All right. Loud and clear. We're gonna wait for a few minutes for a few more people to join up. So if you wanna, I don't know, grab yourself a drink or whatever, go ahead and do that. We'll probably get started maybe about 10 minutes or so. What's up, guys? We're gonna get started here in a few minutes. We're just gonna wait for a few more people to join up. So yeah, if you guys want to, I don't know, grab a drink or something, we'll get started probably at about 10 rather, at about 10 after. Just wait for a few more people to join up. Are you guys able to unmute yourself, or I'm not sure? Should be able to like say something. You guys can chat. I'm here. I'm just chilling. I'm just gonna wait for a few more people to join up. But if you guys want to ask something or say something, feel free.
Yo, what's up?
Yo, what up, man? How you living?
I'm living. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man.
Yeah, yeah, busy day at work today, but I'm glad things finally settled down and I could make it to this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you usually get off pretty late, or?
Nah, today was a rare exception. Like we had a release that went sour, so I had to investigate why and then communicate with people and try to fix it. And yeah, and but things are good. Usually I get to leave on time, so it's not too bad.
Okay, cool. Good, good. Let's see. All right, just a couple more minutes. We'll get a couple more people up in here. I I just read your post on the playbook a couple
Yeah.
minutes ago, Rich. That was cool. It's a cool story.
Yeah, like looking at it now, it's not that exceptional, but at the time, it's just like, well, I'm doing this, and it's like it's she's not leaving, and I keep trying to escalate, and she's still here, and yeah, just kept going.
Yep, yep. Nice. Yeah, it's good. It's always good to get that realization. You're like, oh, I can do this, even if after a breakup or whatever.
Yeah, and it was like I knew what I had to do. Like I kind of knew what the right action was. It's like, well, what Mr. Donut, I'm not gonna have sex here. So it's like, well, what you have to do to have sex with her? Well, I got to get her alone somewhere we can have sex, and then just go for it. That Victor, I think you're from feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I just muted those guys. Somebody was feeding back. Yeah. Bum,
Yeah, and like since the boot camp, I've also started to kind of notice people who are also like loud like I am. And like there's this one guy at work who like he always say hi to me in the morning. He's like, "Hi, how's it going?" And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 dude, chill out, you know?" And then it's like, "Oh, maybe I appear like that to other people." So I try to like keep it more contained, you know?
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a balance, right?
Yeah. Cause you don't want to be too quiet where it's like, what's this dude saying, or is this person even talking with me? But if it comes out of nowhere and you don't even see the guy, and then he touches you from behind and it's like, hi, and it's like, whoa, oh dude, I haven't had my coffee yet, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Um, Let me just see how the best way. I'm gonna go ahead and mute people, but if you have something that you would like to say, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. Like just yeah, just message me. You have a question, or and then I can see it there. Or at the end, of course, we'll also have time for questions. All right. So let's jump into this. Let me quit my line so it doesn't make annoying popping sounds in the middle. Notifications. All right. Here we go. Let's see. All right, verbal game. Google Hangouts. I think I figured it out a little better than the last webinar, so that I sent you guys the direct link as opposed to the YouTube link. So we should be all in the Hangout, which is better for communication and all that. All right, guys. Verbal game. What is verbal game? What are we even talking about here with the verbal game? I'm sure you guys all know that you've heard some of these various statistics or studies and things that talk about how there's a large difference between how much your communication goes from spoken words versus your voice, your body tone, or your tone, and then your body language. So what you say, how you say it, and then your actual what your body's doing on top of that, right? There's all sorts of different things that people have heard of. It's like it's 10% or whatever percent. I like this actually. This is kind of funny. I hadn't heard of this before, but Dr. Albert Mehrabian's 738 55% rule. That's like not very easy to remember, but but it doesn't even add up properly. Seems, oh no, it does. Yeah, it does. I'm dumb. All right, yeah. But basically the idea is that, yeah, so why are we focusing on verbal game? How important is what you actually say? And to start out, it's of course not the most important thing. It's overall less important than subcommunications, voice, tone, body language, etc. So you really want to make sure that you hammer down the fundamentals of nonverbal communication for sure first, and the verbal communication is just kind of the cherry on top. So all these sort of verbal routines, stressing about what you're going to say, what you're going to say, and everything is a lot less important than all of those other things in that pie chart that we just saw. That said, what you can say can have a large effect. Of course, everybody is always, when you first come in, if a guy sees another guy do a successful approach, one of the first things you say, well, what did you say to her, right? It's kind of natural to feel as if, the actual verbal content of your game is quite important. And it is. So that's kind of what we're going to get into. But I just wanted to start with this caveat that no matter, you can have the sickest, most excellent verbal game possible, but if you're saying things with like a really weak tonality, or you're slouching over and you're like turning away from her, you can't make eye contact with her at all, it's not going to have as any sort of powerful effect on her, right? So you want to make sure for sure that you have the foundation, the sundae, the ice cream, and the whatever else, as opposed to just the cherry, Cool. All right, so first we're going to talk about managing tension. All right, so managing tension is a critically important part of actual verbal game, both for when you're meeting them in the first day, when you're meeting girls the first day, and especially also for dates. So a lot of what we're going to talk about deals with both dates and the first date, the first day you meet them. Okay, so tension, and this is just sort of a definition that I'm going to use for the sake of this webinar. I'm sure you could find a whole bunch of different definitions for tension, but it's unreleased energy or unresolved conflict between opposing forces. Okay, so the key part here is that it's unreleased or unresolved. All right, so and we're gonna break down exactly sort of what those mean and why that's important right now, basically. So mastering tension will lead to solid levels of both sexual tension and comfort. And on the other hand, not understanding how tension works in the conversation can either lead to a lack of one of those two things, right? Either sexual tension or comfort. So there's ultimately two ways to manage conflict in dialogue. And by conflict here, I don't mean anything like extreme, World War II or some sort of like intense scenario, although maybe it could be, but just something even really minor, such as like, even something like, is the toilet roll with the loose end in the front or in the back, and you're having this debate with your friend. That's it's kind of a silly example, but or it could be a difference of culture, between Japanese people and wherever you're from, whether you're from the West or wherever else. So any sort of conflict like that, where people's values come into they're kind of like rubbing a little bit. There's a little bit of discrepancy between what one person thinks and what the other person thinks. Maybe this comes up a lot. Like if you meet a girl and she's like, well, I just came out just to have dinner and then go home, and then obviously maybe you have other ideas. There can be a little bit of tension there. Or maybe she's like, well, I don't know what this guy thinks of me. Does he like me? Does he not like me? That's tension right there, and that's conflict. But it's not like, it doesn't need to be seen of as antagonistic, like you against her. It just is like some unresolved energy or conflict between the two opposing forces. Okay, so there's two ways to manage it. One would be to break the tension. So this is like safe. It's like responding quickly, generally agreeable and socially accepted. So what would that mean? So like, let's say you make like a rude joke or something, and you might have some sort of some caveat, or try to make it like soften it a little bit. You'd be like, well, I really have have a lot of gay friends actually, but or you might say, well, I'm just kidding, really, I'm just kidding, that sort of thing. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to break the tension that arose from telling that sort of specific kind of joke. Now, it could of course be something else entirely, but we'll get into a few more examples in a second. But generally, it is the safe way to go. You're trying to make sure the other person feels comfortable, is not offended, right? And you do this by quickly being like, no, it's okay, like it was just a joke, or no, it's okay, I didn't really mean it, that sort of thing. Or no, it's all right, I understand, you don't have to do this, or whatever. Right, and this is the sort of a common thing that like nice people do, right, in society, right, which is why it's socially accepted. And then there's build tension, right? And building tension is a little bit more intense. It can be a slowed response, and it can be a little bit more skeptical and confrontational, right? So as opposed to just believing everything they say, or just agreeing with everything they say, you might be like, well, I don't know, actually I think this, or you might contradict them, you might say no to them, or you might just let this pauses build and let them kind of bask in their uncertainty, in the uncertainty of the moment, and use that kind of in your favor, or not. We're going to look at examples of both of these, both breaking and building tension, tactfully and without tact, or tactlessly. That's what this little diagram here is for. So first, so like if somebody avoids, like, I can't believe you would say that, you'd quickly want to correct their what they thought about you. Be like, no, like, look, I didn't really mean it, or like, it was just a joke, or whatever, right? You want to react immediately to assuage their fears, to diffuse the situation, right? You say, oh, I'm just kidding, right? And it might be from something like, hey, so do you want to come home with me? And the girl's like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, no, I'm just kidding, right? You sort of it's almost like castrating your own power to placate the other person, to make sure the other person doesn't get angry. And this is, obviously it's useful in greater society, so that society can function over the long term, so that people don't get pissed off at each other, right? And death by pillows, right? It's like so comfortable that it's boring, it's stifling almost. It's vanilla, it's milquetoast, it takes no risks, that sort of thing. So constantly breaking tension is pretty unattractive, and it's not even I wouldn't say it's ever really good, right? It's kind of insincere in some ways, right? You say something and then you don't back it up, right? It's almost like, why did you say it in the beginning if you didn't mean it, right? Then there's tactful breaking tension. Okay, so this would be something like easing unnecessary conflict, Acknowledging cultural difference, plausible deniability, right? So, you know, something like if you realize that, you know, maybe Japanese people don't do it this way, but you bring light to that fact, right? So you can think of something like being KY, right? If you do something that's against social norms, but you acknowledge that fact, you're like, oh, look, I know this is, you know, not how you do it, but I'm going to do it this way anyway, right? It suddenly becomes more okay because they're like, oh, well, he knows he's breaking it, but he's conscious of that fact, right? So realizing, and this takes, of course, some sort of intelligence and calibration, but you know, nobody here is an idiot, right? So these things are just important, like creating plausible deniability. Like if you go with, um, if you're going to go on a date with somebody, it'd be kind of ridiculous to be like, well, look, now I'm only going to take you on a date if we're going to have sex, right? Now, why is that? It's because there's absolutely no tension, but it's not even broke. You don't break the tension tactfully either. There's no plausible deniability for her to fall into, for the girl to fall into. She doesn't want to be like, I'm just going to go there and get banged. I mean, maybe if you catch the right girl in the right mood at the right time, she might be all right with that. But vast majority of girls are going to want a bit of plausible deniability. They're going to be like, oh no, we're just meeting to study English together, or we're just meeting to go do this or that together, right? So that is sort of the tactful breaking tension. You realize, look, she's uncomfortable, but there's a good reason for it. She's not, you know, she wants to come out. So I'm going to give her that plausible deniability and give her a way that she can gracefully come out and meet me, right? While at the same time not falling on the tactless side, being like, look, absolutely nothing is going to happen. I promise you, I swear. I write it down in writing or something. I'm never going to make a move on you. Right? That's like too spineless, basically. All right, so tactless building tension. So creepy staring, like literally just like staring at her for like intensely long. And a lot of guys start to try to do things with their eye contact, and it's fine to experiment for sure. I think it's definitely good to experiment and check things out, but you know, you don't want to just have laser eye contact constantly, obviously. Not realizing when you're KY, which again, yeah, I sort of mentioned that in the previous one. Cross wires, so like this happens a lot. Like if there's a cultural difference or there's a language thing that you misunderstand and you're sort of talking through each other, especially if it's in Japanese, they're gonna realize it probably before you do, that you're talking about something that you're not understanding or something. So that's kind of a minor thing, you know, that there's no real way to get around it if it's just legitimately you don't understand or you miss something. But it's something to be aware of. And of course, making things a big deal. You know, everything should be really casual. So you don't want to build tension and make it up to be this huge event, right, or anything like that. I think everybody's seen those like hilarious wedding proposals that just like where the girl just like it's like no 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 and then like smacks the dude and runs away or whatever, right? That's people making things a big deal and making this big tense event kind of tactlessly, right? So then we have reaction time cushion. Reaction time cushion. I was like, what is that? Reaction time cushion. So what this basically means is it's kind of the opposite of being hyperreactive in the upper right corner. A reaction time cushion basically is like creating a little time barrier between when she says something and when you respond, right? It's one of the simplest ways to, you know, make a, you know, to build a little bit of tension tactfully, all right? Create a little bit of more pauses in the conversation before you respond. It gets her kind of curious and excited about what you're about to say next, right? Rather than constantly being like, oh, I understand, I know exactly what you mean, yeah, that's really true. Which, you know, depending on what kind of guy you are, you're going to have different areas of this are going to be sort of the tendencies that you swing to. You know, maybe you're going to swing towards the breaking tension too much, or maybe you swing towards the building tension too much, or whatever, right? And it's natural to swing around, but hopefully it results in calibration in the end. So fangs, I talk about fangs a lot. And kind of what I mean by this is like conveyed sexual intent or implicit sexual intent. Basically, the idea that just simply by how you're talking to her, like as some people call it, like man to woman, basically by the way that you talk to her, by the way that you interact with her, it's clear that you're going to hook up with her if you are given the chance, right? Like if you and her end up alone, right, you're going to kiss her, you're going to take off her clothes, right? You're going to bang her, right? So that sort of vibe that's communicated to the girl without any actual overt sexual conversation. I mean, again, you could do that, but it's not necessary, is the idea of fangs. And why I call it fangs is, well, because you can't really hide fangs. They stick out of your mouth, right? And they're for, you know, hunting, right? So fangs, yeah, that's that idea. Blank stare and the solid yes. So this is building tension in the good way. And you can think of this as like when there's a little like frame battle or a little moment where there's a challenge or a little bit of tension in the interaction. Like if she's like, oh no, I'm not going in there, like referring to your house or a hotel or whatever. The blank stare or solid yes is a great way to build tension in that moment and to sort of hold your ground, right? So she's like, oh, is this your house? Just being like, yep, right? A little bit of time cushion with just a simple yes, right? And then that's it. Just hold your frame and then continue walking in. That's one way to sort of build tension, right? As you're not saying like, look, no, it's okay. Look, I promise we're just gonna, right? And again, there's multiple sides of this. You know, with sometimes you might need to break a little bit more tension, right? You might need to be like, well, look, no, I just want to, let's just chill. We're going to sit down. We're going to listen to music. We're going to talk a bit more, right? That's fine too, right? But the idea here is that you want to find the right balance. You don't want to be too crazy over the top with this like intense, right? We're going to bang now, right? As soon as we go in, that's all that's going to happen, right? And at the same time, you want to be over assuaging her fears or like coddling her or anything like that. Cool. Too much, yeah, and she'll feel uncomfortable, and too little, and she won't feel any spark or sexual excitement, right? So if you're breaking the tension too much, she's going to be like, oh, this guy's really sweet, he's really nice, you know, but she's not going to feel any sort of nervousness, right? And they should feel a bit of nervousness when they're with you, right? They should get a little like doki doki, like a little bit of the heart racing kind of thing. Ultimately, the best sort of mindset for the girl to be in when she's with you is she's like, I'm having fun, I'm liking this interaction, this guy seems cool, I'm not really sure, like, what is he, does he like me? Or like, it seems like he likes me, but I'm not really sure, like, what would happen if I continued to hang out with him a little bit more? What would happen if I went the next step with him, right? So you want that little bit of uncertainty, which is kind of crushed if you are constantly breaking the tension, right? And it's made too explicit if you're constantly building the tension, okay? So it's kind of like waves, right? You want to go up and down a little bit, but it's very important to keep in mind this balance, right? Next, we're shifting gears. We're moving on to building your content repertoire. So we're going to talk about what we're actually talking about, both on dates, yeah, and the first day you meet them, content of your conversation. So over time, your arsenal of verbal content will grow, which you can then deploy. You can deploy your stories, jokes, questions, assumptions, and statements around as needed. And I very much do think of this as something that you build up over time as you're going around, you know, talking to women, basically, right? You know, like the more approaches you do, for example, the more you have, like, it's like you learn a series of moves, right? It's like, I don't know, like Street Fighter or something. You start out with like the basic punch or the jab or whatever, like the short punch, which is like just going up and saying hi, right? And then maybe you learn like how to like do an assumptive opener, or like make an assumption, be like, hey, you seem like the kind of girl who never cleans her bedroom or something, right? So then you learn, like, you got the jab and you got the hook, right? You keep learning moves, right? And it's just like that, right? Your verbal content grows, but you have to keep pushing it. You have to keep increasing the amount of experience that you have in the field in order to grow that verbal content, right? And this can also just be on dates as well, right? Dates are important to build those skills as well, because obviously you have to talk to girls a bit longer, usually like a couple hours at least. So you're going to have to develop some, more longer stories. And this really comes into play especially if you start gaming in Japanese, or if you're gaming girls who don't speak a lot of English, you're going to have to learn how to best phrase these things. Some things are not going to come across, right? Some certain cultural references about, like, growing up in the 90s or the 80s or whatever, like, she's not gonna know, unless she's really a special kind of Japanese girl. She's not gonna know what, Motley Crue or what Gushers are, or whatever, right? Like, any sort of whatever memories you have, like, she's not going to know what, like, Lunchables were, like kickball is, or any of these kind of things. I mean, these are all American references, so even if you're not from the US, you might not know what some of those things are. But point is that she's not going to know what a lot of those cultural specific things are. So you're going to have to learn which sort of pieces of your verbal content are going to go across consistently with Japanese girls. And on top of that, the more you sort of weave in together the stories, jokes, questions, assumptions, and statements, all these things, you're going to build, like, you're going to get used to the movements, right? And the transition between them. So just like, jab, hook, kick, right? Hadoken, all of those things, you learn to string them together into particularly effective combinations, right? But you're not able to do that unless you, like, really practice a lot, right? Which of course means going out more, talking to more girls, going on more dates, and practicing more. Yep. Yeah, so store them away for reuse and think of better ways to phrase them. So there's always better ways. Like, I always I'll try to tell a story for the first time, especially in Japanese or something. I'll kind of struggle through it. And then, like, after that time, I'll have, like, a better idea. I'll be like, oh yeah, like, that's how I should say it. And the girl is cool because it's kind of language practice too. Like, the girls will be like, oh, did you mean this or this word, or like this way of saying it? And you're like, yeah, that's better. Yeah, all right, thanks for helping me out. And then that helps you next time you talk to a girl. You're like, thanks for helping me gain more chicks, right? So yeah, so store them away for reuse and keep improving them, and keep the flow improving as well. Recycle, upgrade, edit over time. Richer content. Okay, so upgrade from talking about yourself from telling information to conveying values in story form. So condense information, present without introduction. So it's like trimming the fat. So no introduction. Or anything like that. So for an example, just, hey, I live in Wisconsin, I have 2 sisters, moved to Japan when I was 26. This is very straightforward, right? It's like almost like I don't know, like a Wikipedia page or something, right? Instead, like, you could say something like, Brittany always used to tease me about my inability to talk to girls back in our farm. But I took it as a challenge. I'm out here meeting people while she's back there working in the same city. Even in this, like, these 2 sentences, like, it says kind of the similar thing, right? Like, Brittany, I guess, would be like the sister, right? But you're not introducing her, in this particular sentence, right? You're just kind of cutting out the introduction and the end to the story, and just giving, like, the peak, the little meaty chunk in the middle, which conveys specific values, right? So there's a lot of emotional content to talk about in this particular example, like inability to talk to girls, right? She's back there in the same city, right? I took it as a challenge. There's, like, the sibling rivalry angle, there's, like, the talking to girls angle, relationships there. She's working in the same city, right? You could talk about, like, that sort of thing as well. So there's a lot more to talk about here. Whereas if you this first part is it's almost kind of like a lazy introduction or lazy backstory. So convey values want to instill into story form for easy digestion, right? So things are like adventurous, live in the moment, don't regret things. If something is good, you know it right away. You don't need time to make a decision if the quality is there. These are things which, I mean, I particularly use pack into stories for setting the frame for the SNL, right? For the same night or for the same date, even hookup, right? Because they are my values for sure as well, right? But so something like an example would be if something is good, you know it right away. You don't need time to make a decision if the quality is there, right? You could tell a story like, for example, like, well, I went to the store the other day. I went to the department store, and then, there was my favorite brand. They had this really cool jacket, and it was on sale, right? It was on sale. There were only 3 left, and it was like really, it was really nicely made. I tried it on, and it fit me perfectly. It really was cool. I was kind of, deciding. I wasn't sure if I would get it or not, so, but ultimately, like, everything was just perfect about it. It just fit me like a glove. The material is really good. Again, it was my favorite brand. It was great. So, usually I try to go back and buy something again later, but, if it's really good, you know it right away, right? And in that way, basically obviously what you're setting up through metaphor and through the story is you're giving her permission to hook up with you the same day, right? You're going to be able to be like, look, like, like, you don't need time to, if something is there, if there's chemistry there, if there's affinity there, you know it immediately, right? But because you're saying it in a story form, it's much easier for them to digest and accept, right? People don't really like to be like told things. Like if you tell somebody directly, like, you should think this or you should think that, people like kind of resist that, and for good reason. So using stories is almost like Inception, right? Where they plant the seed in like the dream, and then they make the person think it was their own idea. Like the story, it's a little bit more of a roundabout way of kind of being persuasive, because you're not letting on the fact that you're trying to be persuasive, if that makes sense, right? So the same thing with, adventurous, living in the moment, don't regret. I think there's a few examples of some stories I had of those in the course, like living in the moment. I tell a story about when I first came to Japan, and I was saving myself from my first girlfriend, and I turned down all these girls, but then I went back and she had hooked up with my best friend, so I regretted not having fun in Japan, right? It's another example of a story like that really conveys like this whole life is short type of vibe. Basically, you don't have to use these exact ones, although they do work quite well. But it's good if you ever want to kind of convince somebody of something, or like impress upon them a specific value. If you package it in a story, it's a lot easier to digest, right? Yeah, so here's some other examples. Alternatively, love finds you when you don't expect it. Sometimes things catch your eye suddenly and completely. Yeah, that sort of thing. So next, we're going to talk about mastering the transition. Master the transition. So the transition between chunks of conversation is usually where people feel like, oh, I don't really have anything to say. I'm at a loss for words. Like I'm running out of things to say. I'm not sure, whatever. Right. So the transition is an important time in the conversation where you can kind of create like the illusion of fluency, right? So what you want to do is you want to focus on fluency rather than literary ability. Now, obviously, you want to do both. And I'm talking mostly here about Japanese, but it could also be about English as well, I suppose. So the fluency itself, like the word fluent, right, it conjures to mind the image of like flowing water, right? Like everything's flowing, everything's moving, right? Rather than like choppy and starting and stopping, that sort of thing. So the transition is the point at which attention wavers, which is fine. You know, it's fine to have pauses. It's fine to have silence in the conversation as well. You shouldn't feel like you always have to talk, but mastering the transition is really important for something we're going to be talking about a little bit later, which is the moments of critical moments where you need to hold attention. But by increasing your ability to control the transition, you increase your ability to command attention for longer amounts of time. And it's very important, especially in the first couple minutes when you meet a girl, like on the street or something, and also at these like important critical times, like when you're pulling home. Here's some Japanese for the transitions. So like toyu koto de, right, as an end note or conclusion. It can even just be like continuing on after that. Te kanji, softening. Toieba, tiyuka sa, so changing the topic. Nande ieba ii ndaro? Just to buy thinking time, like how should I put it? What should I say? Nandaro. Right. Just a few more. Janainkai. Playfully accusatory, revealing. Janainkai. Uso janainkai. Uso yanainkai. That's the kansai if you add the ya instead of the ja. Surebae yang, offering advice. You know, if she's like, oh my god, I just got namped by this creepy old guy when I was coming to meet you. Like he was like, I come with me to a hotel, and you just be like, surebae yang, like you should have just gone with him or something. It's kind of a silly silly little interjection. Shitara, right? Kitara. Suruto, or so suruto, to omoebai, you should think of it as yappari sa, as we feared, as we expected. Now, these are not like, these are, you know, things that I'm sure most of you have heard many, many times. And it's not that they're particularly odd or, you know, irregular words or phrases. In fact, they're pretty common, right? But that's exactly why it's powerful. So I'm saying basically, like, rather than learning like very specific nouns and verbs for certain cases, yeah, that's important, I guess, but it's much more important to have these like phrases that are in the transition of, you know, when you're changing from one topic to another topic, or when you're saying this and then, you know, switch over into that sort of thing. Okay. Jump in. Okay, shuffling around content. Okay, so as you have you have your increased, richer content, you have the mastery of the transition with the Japanese words inserted. You can cut between all these different things for extra power, right? You can think of this as opening many tabs on a browser, right? If you're anything like me, you know, I open like, by the end of the day, I have like 1 million tabs on my browser, right? You got like a few like songs on YouTube, some random videos, like a bunch of tabs of work, you know, like maybe Facebook and some email and, you know, a funny image I was going to share with somebody later, you know, all open on the browser, right? And by the same, you know, thought, like I have every intention of jumping back to them later, right? So just like that, you can think of, you know, when you open a conversation, you can think of it as something you're storing away that you can call back to at a later moment, right? Same way as suddenly skipping onto another track, like on a CD or vinyl, by shifting the needle over. You can always cut back again, right? So speaking in this way, as opposed to linearly, like waiting until one topic ends, then starting another topic, completing it to its conclusion, and then ending, is more engaging, and it makes you seem more charismatic and intelligent, even if you're not. Yeah, it's good for fooling people. Yeah, cool. So you can stitch the content with the Jago phrases from the beginning. So let's look at an example. Brittany always used to tease me about my inability to talk to girls back on our farm in Wisconsin. But in Japan, I think I've finally broken out of my shell and got a little more confident since coming here 7 years ago. Tiyuka-sa, how tall are you again? Yappari ne, Japanese people love drinking. Back in the day, I pounded Kahlua milks for breakfast, but these days my stomach can only handle gin soda. Tiyukoto de. right? I'm getting old or something, right? Whatever sort of conclusion you want to have. And again, like you can kind of slice literally like part way. You don't even have to, this could even be a monologue, right? You don't even need any sort of input from the girl for this. You could, right? You know, you could wait for her answer for how tall she is, or you could wait for her to comment about your Wisconsin life or about your alcoholism or whatever, but it's not necessary, right? The important part here is that you just, if you're able to jump around kind of between topics, it seems like more has happened in a shorter amount of time. Okay. Critical moments, right? So there's always these important moments where, you know, it's critical to keep their attention, basically. So you want to keep talking in a compelling manner and not really like let the conversation die down. So for example, when an AMOG busts into your set in the club or the bar or something, some random dude is trying to capture her attention. When her friends are trying to pull her away, you know, it might seem crazy, but like you can get a girl to stay, like to be like, shut up, friends, like I'm talking to this guy, right? On a date when you're trying to pull home, right? Distracting her out for a long walk to your place. You know, like if you have, you know, like maybe a 30-minute walk from the station or something, and you have, if you're able to keep up a lively conversation for 30 minutes, it won't seem like a long time. But you know, the second the conversation drops and wavers, she's gonna be like, how far is this, right? So during time constraints, so if she has a last train, curfew, upcoming appointments, or meeting with friends or whatever, you know, again, just being compelling, she might just miss those things. So all these moments and more, if you stop engaging her conscious and emotional mind, she will remember her obligations, right? And the social role she's meant to be occupying. So the good girl, she'll like suddenly come to her senses or snap out of it, right? It's almost like literally by talking, you're putting them in a trance, right? And it's not anything malicious or anything weird. It's literally you're just talking, right? The sound of your voice and your presence and your ability to focus on the conversation topic at hand has kind of a tranquilizing role on her, right? Tranquilizing effect. Yeah, if she's laughing and or engaged, she will stay with you. She won't like realize how long it's been since, you know, she walked from the station, or she won't remember like that curfew. I mean, sometimes it will. She won't, you know, pay attention to the dude who busts in your set or whatever. Okay. So the slow boil pull. All right. So one important part and one thing that I kind of include a lot of times when pulling to my house or a hotel, especially if it's unexpected, is to slow boil the, I'm not sure why this is on slow boil the pull. Yeah, is the slow boil concept. So how many of you guys know this, the frog, the boiling the frog metaphor, right? So basically the idea is that you put a frog in water, right? And the frog is happy in water, right? It's like, oh yeah, woo, I'm in water, cool. And then you just turn up the temperature ever so slowly. But it's so slow that the frog doesn't ever realize that it's being cooked. And of course, is that you want to gradually, it's the idea of going to a house or a hotel before you reach it, right? And this can be after you've left the venue and you're on your way to your house or the hotel. You want to use stories and actions which lead her to the conclusion herself. Again, sort of like that inception idea that we were talking about before, rather than saying it bluntly. Although, again, as with everything, you could do that as well. If confronted, like if she asks you, it's often advantageous to be a bit vague at first, like, oh, like let's just rest, let's hang out, let's grab a drink, right? We're just gonna go this way, right? And then if she keeps asking, of course, at some point you're gonna have to acknowledge it after further questioning. You'd be like, yeah, we're going to my house, right? So my Dogenzaka slow boil. So for some of you guys who know, I lived in Dogenzaka, which is where all the love hotels are, and it is rather seedy. There's a lot of hotels. There's a lot of like prostitutes kind of walking around like with their customers and stuff. There's like random dudes in the street that are probably yakuza or whatever, and all that kind of stuff, right? And I wanted to have a little bit more control over it than just kind of walk through the neighborhood and have her be like, what, have her feel slightly uncomfortable. So I gradually, and this sort of developed organically, once again, going back to the first point about how it's all about exposure and time, that, you know, more times you do this or you try to talk to girls, the more content you have, and the smoother you are able to express that content. So basically the slow boil would go something like this. We would leave the first venue, like an izakaya or a restaurant or something. This is mostly for dates, but I would also do it on, you know, SNLs as well. It doesn't really matter. But so I'm going to use the example of the date. So we leave the izakaya, we turn to go up towards Dogenzaka. And I would say something like, well, you know, like a lot of people think it would be really convenient to live in Shibuya, but it's actually kind of inconvenient, right? So basically, that is like slipping in, the incepting into her mind, oh, he lives in Shibuya, right? But because it's stated in a subtle way, it's like, that's not quite like, we're going to my house now, right? So yeah, but so a lot of people would say that it's kind of inconvenient to, or convenient to live in Shibuya, but it's actually kind of inconvenient. You know, there's not any good grocery stores, and you know, it's just depa chicas like under the department store. Those kind of like expensive little shops. It's not really like a proper supermarket, and I do like to cook. And this area can get kind of seedy, you know, there's a lot of people like hanging out in the streets, but this street up there, like once I turn the corner, it's just like my little hometown, my little heaven, and it's really like quite relaxed actually compared to the rest of Shibuya and Dogenzaka, and it's kind of surprising how you can just, of course, you know, in that little slur, right, which, you know, there's more to it as well. It could go on for longer as needed, but basically the idea is to engage her mind consciously the entire time while you're at the transition, right, from the first venue to your house, so that she doesn't have any pause and be like, where are we going, what are we doing, right? And at the same time, gradually through words conveying across in a specific pattern, like, hey, first, you know, I live in Shibuya, then, yeah, I live here, and then break the idea of going into it. And so sometimes it can be a little bit abrupt, a little bit extreme. Now, I won't always do this. Again, sometimes, you know, you don't need the slow boil. Sometimes you can just be like, yeah, so let's go to my house now and play Mario Kart or whatever, right? And the girl will be like, okay, fine, cool. But it's just something to keep in mind, like the psychology behind it. And obviously, like the words I was using towards the end of it, it's like, and I turn this corner and everything is chill and calm and relaxed, right? Obviously, those words have an impact on her. She starts to feel chill and calm and relaxed, right? Because by that point in the date, she's pretty much fallen into my frame, right? And that's because of what happens, you know, just when we're sitting down at the date. Okay, so that's the idea of this slow boil, and yeah, how that helps with pulling. Questions. Let's see. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go here to the control. Let's see. I'm gonna unmute. Wait, what? These. Hide their audio. I think you guys are able to unmute yourself. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, guys. Do you have any questions about any of this stuff? We're gonna talk about a few. About anything in these 5 points. I know there's a few of the points where like the first point was a little bit different from the other ones, but I wanted to kind of go over all of those things in particular. see if I can unmute you guys. Questions. I have a friend in Tokyo, in town with no Japanese skill. Any tips? Yeah, I mean, just go to Roppongi, man. Like, I assume in town means in Tokyo, but like I had a student. Oh, in Osaka. Okay, yeah, Osaka. I think there's. I mean, I'm not as familiar with Osaka, but I think there's some area. There must be some areas where little English skill here. There must be some areas where there's more. Where's Matt? Like Max, you should talk to Max as well because he definitely knows that city pretty well. English, like I went out with I go out regularly with guys. Like sometimes guys on programs. Oh, you are Max. Oh, what? Okay. Any tips other than talk slow and easy words? Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, if they can learn even just like super basic katakana, that definitely helps for sure. Like, you know, hambaga or whatever. Um, that helps. If they're, it depends like where they're coming from. You know, if they're coming from certain countries, they're gonna have like there was a guy who came from the U.S. who I was teaching a while ago, and he really had he would make all he was trying to do all this bantery stuff like uh, you know like U.S. style game. So that was kind of like it wasn't related to the language itself, but it was here. Let me see if I can flip this back over. Oh, there we go. All right, here we go. So yeah, he wasn't related to the language itself, but he would do all these things like really over the top, kind of clowning like gestures or whatever, and just making sure that you're kind of chill because the energy in Japan it's not quite. I mean, you guys know this well, but it's not super clowny, right? Come across as kind of corny. In terms of specifically English, yeah, like yeah, again, just talking slow and easy words. Those are pretty good ones to begin with. Um, yeah, Google Translate, Line Translate. I don't think it's an issue really. Like, um, I guess just telling them that look, like even if they say they don't speak English, they probably do, and just continue, persist a bit. For those of us like myself that tend more on the relative or the relieve tension side of things, do you have an exercise or homework to practice building tension? Yeah. So if like for the relieve tension kind of guys, or like the empathy side kind of guys, there's like if there's any sort of shit tests that girls give you, like that sort of the blank stare or the solid yes are really good like responses that basically overcomes any shit test girls will ever kind of give you, right? Um, it can be tempting like to kind of like laugh with them or like kind of join in on the joke, and that's very much a like a relieving tension kind of way. But you can also do that like the you know, the blank stare or the solid yes. And I would practice this as well, like kind of more deadpan humor, as opposed to like really reactive, like right. Um, yeah, just doing things like just be like, "What'd you say?" Right. Even adding like a little bit, just pauses before you respond as well. There's a few guys that I don't know if they're in here. I don't think they are, but there are some people who definitely fall into that kind of like like almost like jumping down the girl's throat before she's even finished speaking, just making sure that you're not kind of doing that sort of thing. And yeah, building those kind of pregnant pauses a little bit, just a few seconds. I can think of it as like a little buffer. She says something, deep, deep, deep. You respond, deep, deep, deep. If any of you guys have met Ko, he's pretty good at this actually. He'll just like, she'll say something, she'll be like, well, I think this and blah, blah, blah. And he'll be like, all right, well, right. And then start talking. It's not like an immediate response right away. Anything else, guys? Let's see what people are. Do you have any tricks when starting out to say when you get into a conversation dead end or when you draw a blank? Yeah, I mean, like, just you can even practice on your own. The kind of, like just like sort of rehearsing a few things. You should always have like a few stories that you could tell about yourself. Like a lot of people just don't tend to not talk about themselves, especially right at the beginning of the conversation. When they're talking to girls, they'll just be like, they'll ask a million questions about them. But it's quite powerful to talk about yourselves and what you're about, what you're interested in. Another really good one is like hypothetical situations, and you can just make these totally up, or it could be drawn from your history, your personal history or whatever. It could be like, so, like my best friend used to be dating this guy at her workplace, but then they broke up and now she's dating another guy at the same workplace, and the first guy is saying that that's like she shouldn't be doing that. And what do you think? Like, is that like, right? Getting their opinion about some sort of hypothetical situation is always like that will like some question like that will always open up some sort of long-winded opinion. They'll definitely have some sort of opinion about it. You can say something like, if a guy and a husband and wife are married, do you think it's okay for the husband to go to a prostitute, or does that count as cheating or not, or like what, right? Because like I see a lot of people in Japan, I see a lot of older guys, like going to prostitutes. So I was just wondering, like, do you think the wives are okay with that? And what about you? Would you be okay with that? Like that sort of thing opens up like a huge like can of worms. Like if you ask a question like that about like relationship dynamics to a chick, she's just gonna talk your ear off, man. So I guess those would be like the two big tips for like re-sparking a conversation or keeping a conversation going. Talking about yourself, specifically like your thoughts, what you've been thinking about recently, what you've been doing, or past stories about yourself, and then like asking some sort of hypothetical question, especially about relationships, because it's just such like a volatile topic, you know what I mean? Like it just explodes into much more than it started out as. Cool. Does that answer your guys' question? Nice. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, so the question was, do you ever get bored of routines? Absolutely. Yeah, like without a doubt. I think that actually like getting bored of things and getting bored of routines is like really powerful, because like if you start out like nervous and then you move into like bored, and then from boredom comes like creativity, right? So like sometimes I totally get kind of bored in sets, but that's what like causes me to want to build new, like explore new conversational ground, as it were, right? So usually if I get bored, I'll just start like just digging into the girl, like digging into like getting into like all these different topics, but in new angles or new situations, that sort of thing. um so yeah, definitely do get bored, but I think it like it's like the void, right? It's not actually empty. It's like more like potential to create, if that makes sense. So, but rather than just telling some story that I'm bored of, I'll try to like dig up or like unearth something interesting or intriguing about that girl in particular, or something something I hadn't thought of, or something new. But yeah, definitely, it's easy for sure to get bored um, in interactions. But I do think it allows you to be more creative. Well, I'll jump back into one last thing I wanted to talk about, and then I'll ask some final questions right at the end. But I'm going to talk about one last thing here. I wasn't sure if I was going to go into this, but might as well because I put it in here. So pattern interrupts. Okay, so basically the idea of a pattern interrupt is, yeah, let's so the idea of a pattern interrupt is everybody has patterns that they fulfill. If you're a programmer, it's probably pretty simple to understand this. It's like running like a short script or something, right? And you can think of this like, if you've ever done like a relatively menial kind of work, like something like a cashier at a supermarket or whatever, you very quickly, after a few days, it's almost like you're on autopilot, right? And you do things that, you do your job almost without thinking, right? You grab the item, you scan the item, you know, you keep doing that, and then you like make the receipt, or I don't even, it's hard for me to come up with all the steps because it's not my job, but you get the idea, right? Like, or if you work at a specific, you work at Subway or something, you get the bread, you cut the bread, you toast the bread, right? Like there's the very specific steps, and after, a few days or a few weeks, you're basically asleep at the wheel, but you still automatically do it, right? And those are patterns, right? Like if somebody drives every day the same day to work, maybe on Saturday someday they'll be going to visit a friend, but they'll absent-mindedly just start driving to work, right? Because it's just a pattern, right? I think everybody can experience this, but so what is a pattern interrupt? It's an ultimate frame control method. This is something that again, if the verbal game was the cherry on the top, then this is like the cherry on the cherry, like the mini cherry, like the cherry's baby that you can't see until you zoom in on the cherry or whatever, right? Basically, don't worry about this at all until you get the basics down, but it's kind of fun to think about. It's kind of interesting to know about. At least I would say this is something that's like quite advanced, that you really don't need to worry about. Unless everything else is like ironed out solid, but it can be cool to try to kind of play around with. So initiate a routine is the first step. So basically like mechanical or automatic, like buying something from a vending machine, opening a door, shaking your hand, standing up to like compare height or whatever is another one. So be like, then you want to interrupt the pattern partway through, and then finally insert the content you'd like to convey or the action that you'd like to do, okay? This is just a way to basically like hack the conscious brain. Okay, so going through these steps in a specific example, I'll just use the like, standing up to compare height. You just be like, oh, like, you're sitting down with a chick, you'd be like, oh, here, hang on, like, how tall are you again? Like, stand up. And then, like, as soon as they stand up, you just, like, change what they're doing. You'd be like, oh, like, look at this over here on the wall. Or, like, wait, come over here. Or just kiss them, right? Now, why is this so effective? Well, basically, it's just because, like, when we're doing something, or thinking about something, or when we're automatically in the process of when we've started a script, as it were, the tendency is to go all the way to the end. So you're already it's like inertia. You're already moving, and then somebody comes in and hijacks the middle of that script and diverts it to another action. Right? It's very easy to go along with that second action, and it kind of there's less resistance to it. Okay, so it's kind of like a really quick overview of pattern interrupts. These are something which, if you can get this, like, it's kind of taking that slice and dice, or like mixing up the conversational topics idea to the next level, where you can even ask a question, and before they answer it, you have already switched the conversation, right? But they're still sort of like half thinking about that question and half thinking about the next question. And it gives you definitely an advantageous position for sure. All right, that's it for pattern interrupts. I might make, I don't know, like a longer video or something about this at a later point, but I just wanted to throw this out there real quick at the end here. Cool. All right, guys, any final questions? Anything else you guys want to ask, get off your chest? Or about pattern interrupts? Anything completely unrelated to the webinar is fine as well, actually. Tips for practicing monologuing. You can do it in the shower. I mean, it doesn't have any, yeah, a lot of what we talked about today kind of directly overlaps with what we, with monologuing itself. One thing that is kind of like a funny little tip is, sometimes when you make that first assumption, like if you're making an assumption about a girl, right, and you're making the obvious assumption, that can be good, because it's highly likely to be accurate, right? Of course, right? But at the same time, if you make the number two assumption, can be really powerful as well, and even funnier. Or if you start to make an assumption, but then you're like, wait, let me like actually make like a weirder assumption, that gives you like an interesting advantage, because like everybody's probably been like told a specific thing about themselves, or asked a specific question from a million strangers. So if you're doing the first thing that pops in your mind, like for me, for example, a lot of people, Japanese people would be like, wait, you're not American, right? Like, or like other people would, people come up to you and they say like the same kind of thing based off of your appearance, and it'll be like half of all the people will say that. Or like some girls who look like a half white or whatever, or half foreign, hafu, everybody will come up to them and say hafu, and they'll be like, no, I'm not a hafu, god damn it, right? So if you make the second assumption, and hafu is actually a bad example because there isn't, it's not so non-specific that there isn't anything there. But like for example, if a girl has a suitcase and you see her in Tokyo, like the first major assumption would be like, okay, she's from Osaka, right? But the number two assumption would be like, what if she's from Nagoya or from Fukuoka or something, right? Some non-major city, right? Or you can make some really, really off the wall, like like strange assumption, like she's from like the Jeju Islands, or like she's an Ainu tribeswoman from the north. I don't even know, but you know what I'm saying? Like basically the point is that like sometimes rather than the first assumption, like the most obvious assumption, it can be useful to make like a strange, like a purposefully odd assumption, or just like the number two assumption as well. And that can work um, even better if you're right, for sure. As for general tips for practicing monologue, yeah, I mean, like, just do it. Like, is there any specific part that you're finding difficult about it? Um, you could build up a structure. Like, you could be like, well, first I'm gonna like make an assumption about her, and then I'm gonna segue into a story, right? And then I'm gonna segue into my agenda, right? And then I'm gonna ask a question, right? And you could stitch those pieces together specifically so that you have a structure that you can always fall back on. But ultimately, I do think that like, yeah, if you're doing the same thing over and over, it's probably gonna bore you after a while, and you're gonna want to break out of that for sure, which is good, right? The boredom will pull you out of it. If you go to Thailand to learn Muay Thai, how many weeks would you go to really learn enough to internalize that confident fighter aura? You can learn in Japan too, and it's not just Muay Thai. You could do kickboxing, boxing, jiu-jitsu, any of that stuff. Yeah, I do like Muay Thai because it's like you literally get hit in the face, which is like it sucks, right? Like, I mean, nobody really wants to get hit in the face, but like you kind of realize you're like, I'm not actually made of glass, right? Like it's pretty cool. It's pretty liberating. But I think like like other guys get some confidence from just normal weightlifting or whatever. How many weeks? I don't really know, man. Like I didn't I never really learned Muay Thai in Thailand until like not that long ago. So most of the time I was just in Japan, right? Going to classes and stuff, and that's fun. Mostly it's the sparring that's the part that the classes are cool. Like you learn the techniques, but it's actually the sparring which is like which I find have the most benefits in terms of like making you feel badass, right? But I don't know. Like if you went for a month and did it like every day, then yeah, you probably get pretty, you get a lot out of it for sure. Yeah, Muay Thai is fun. Cool. All right, guys. If there's not any other questions, we're gonna end that here. Definitely let me know in the chat if you guys have anything in specific you'd like in the next webinar. Just dropping frames, dropping frames. All right. Yeah. But as I was saying, definitely shoot me a message online. When you guys want to, if you guys want to chat on Skype or something, we can set up a time. Just go over whatever. If you want to share stories, ask questions, talk about a specific girl or a specific sticking point you've been having. Yep, definitely hit me up online. All right, cool, guys. Peace out. See you guys next time.